Faith shapes how billions of people see the world, their purpose, their morality, and their hope. But before all the theology, before all the arguments, and before religion became debated, there were people searching for meaning. Hi, I'm Faithless, and Personal Faith is a video series about those people, where they're able to explain in their own words their faith, what they believe, and why. Now, none of the people interviewed here are meant to represent their religion as a whole. Instead, this series is meant to take a look at the many different ways people interpret their religions, how they interact with them, and how they practice them day to day. So maybe you know these religions, maybe you don't, but we hope that as you take this journey with us, through something that is very personal and intimate to people, that you'll at least come away with a better understanding of the individuals and what they believe, their stories, and their experiences. Let's break it down. I am Seth from Faithless Devotions, working with Faith Breakdown to do interviews with theists about their personal beliefs. And today I have with me Joel. Feel free to promo anything that you're doing. I know that you probably have a YouTube channel and things, so absolutely get that out there, and we'll try to get some views your way. But thank you for doing this once again, and welcome to it. I guess we'll just get rolling. Is there anything you want to say first off?
I do have a YouTube channel under my name, Joel Shaker Harris, and on it there's like current events commentary, spiritual reflections, some poetry, and some hip hop and some addiction recovery type material.
Nice. Well, definitely everybody should give you a like and a subscribe and go check that stuff out. Absolutely. So I guess we'll start with the first question then, which is, could you give us a little bit of your background, just anything that you're comfortable talking about, maybe about your life?
Yeah, sure. So I'm 49. I was born in a town called Lancaster, which is in like south central Pennsylvania,
Mm-hmm.
about an hour and a half west of Philadelphia. When I was around 8, we moved to a suburb immediately outside West Philadelphia called Upper Darby, and in Delaware County, which Delaware County has recently gotten a little bit of national attention. It's in the setting of certain. There's a show called Task on HBO, and then there's
Okay.
another show called Mayor of Easttown that was set in Delco. And one of the main things about my life is the fact that I'm in long-term recovery.
Mm-hmm.
We are cautioned about the trickiness of possibly inadvertently promoting certain types. Like I do a 12-step program, so I'm not going to name which one it is
Right.
because I don't want to necessarily promote it, but the 12 steps in general are a big part of my spiritual journey. I grew up first with a little bit of faith, but then it switched into a kind of faith in essentially kind of a politics.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that was almost a form of religion, like really close. And then I kind of carried that into my adult life. And then I was spiritual, not religious, for a long time. And in the last, while exploring Christianity specifically off and on, but in the last like 4 years, I kind of made the plunge and made a commitment to be a Catholic Christian full
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Now, so you said that you had some sort of experience with faith when you were younger. Did I hear that right?
So my father, my grandfather was technically a Baptist, like he wouldn't call himself necessarily a Baptist, but he was associated with other Baptist churches.
Mm-hmm.
And so in Dayton, Ohio, was where my dad was born, and my grandfather Ivan was essentially evangelical fundamentalist Baptist minister.
Okay.
And my father was originally going to become a minister himself, but he was born in '53, so he kind of was like early teens, mid-teens when like the whole '60s happened, and so
Mm-hmm.
into the '70s he got kind of intoxicated with left-wing politics and counterculture,
Mm-hmm.
and he tried to have that like converge with his religious faith, but it didn't.
Didn't mix.
Eventually, it just turned into he did take me, and this is interesting for some people that might not know this. There, like a lot of the mainline Protestant churches are actually themselves become more politically focused focused on leftist liberal politics than more so faith. And I remember he did take me for a little bit to a multi-ethnic, multiracial church in West Philadelphia that was really focused on like activism and like trying to like help like the marginalized and the disenfranchised. And so we did do that, but he did not speak about being actually in any kind of metaphysical relationship with God or Jesus Christ very much, if at all,
Gotcha.
past maybe the age of me being 5. And then in later life, when I asked him, he basically had said that he had lost his faith.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt you. I do have
No,
one other
please.
follow-up
Sorry
question I
to
want to
go
ask.
so far.
But no, you're absolutely fine. It's a free space. You go wherever you
Right.
need to go. But I did want one silly thing that I forgot to do was to make sure that I have you recording correctly. So give me just 1 second. We're going to pick up where we left off. I had one question. You had said that your dad was Baptist, right? Was that
Yeah.
did I have that right?
Yeah.
And you were currently Catholic, right?
Yes.
Can you
Yes.
give me a little bit of because those a lot of the times in internet crowds especially those are put at really opposite ends of the spectrum as far as Christianity is. Can you tell me a little bit about the journey from Protestant to Catholicism?
Yeah. I mean, but even within Protestantism, there's a lot of variation. A lot of it gets into some of the theology, and some of it gets into the way that like culture and ethnicity has converged with these things. And so, like in tracing back some of my ancestry, like on my mom's side, what I find is that we were Scots Irish, and
Okay.
we came over earlier, like 1700s or the 1800s. I think I may have some of the more Catholic Irish also intermingled in there, but they tended to come more in the mid 1800s, late 1800s, and they were Irish Catholics, which was different. And on my father's German side, obviously going back to maybe not obviously, but Martin Luther was a German who was essentially the first Protestant, and so baptism in many ways is an offshoot of that kind of Lutheran Protestantism. And so the interesting thing is that there isn't a neat way to divide these things up politically, but there are like ideological differences, particularly from like the strain of the baptism that my father believed, like originally believed in. It was very, very my dad would call it like reactionary. It was another like synonym for conservative. And in the sense that, but it's pejorative in a way where it's negative, where it's like you react to any kind of change or any kind of innovation or any kind of progress in a way where you want to revert back to something like, and it plays out in a way because a lot of times if you listen to politically, and I'm not trying to say anything bad about this, I'm not like impugning the motives or the character of the people that are conservatives. I'm just saying that there's often like a move in the way that they describe what they would like to see in their country or in the world. They often reference like the 1950s in America as being this ideal time, right?
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of like reactionaryism, and in many ways, a lot of conservatism just does come out of like there's a lineage back where a lot of ethnic people that came here like as pioneers and lived in these small towns, a lot of times it actually kind of makes sense in some ways. I'm not saying I justify some of the offshoots of their thinking that could end up with like bigotry or not caring for the poor, for example, but in the way what they're like, they don't necessarily, a lot of small town people that were simple folk that came here from Europe, they don't necessarily feel like they need to reinvent the wheel culturally a lot. And so they really are often invested in preserving their traditions up to and including their faith traditions. But it's more like the faith traditions are the tip of the iceberg and the culture is the actual iceberg. And so and then you had the 60s, which challenged all of that everywhere, right? And so I think a lot of it was the cultural changes that really did not allow my father to continue to be that kind of like strict conservative. A good word for it is parochial.
Yeah.
And that's funny because that comes from the word parish, which is a Catholic idea. But like in this Delaware County, I've noticed like where I live and living here for a long time, and this isn't a criticism either, because a lot of the people here like have been great. Like they're more urban and suburban, but they're almost like salt of the earth in their own way. But there's a kind of provincialism, is another word, or a parochialism a lot of times to their culture, where a lot of them have never really traveled further than the Jersey Shore.
Mm.
And a lot of times they haven't been college educated. And again, I'm not saying being college educated makes anybody better than anybody. It's just different, right? It's just a
Right.
different access to different information. And so a lot of times they're even skeptical of like those kind of ideas, like
Yeah.
those higher education based ideas. And so my father, in kind of embracing, more cosmopolitan culture and embracing some of the ideas that were floating around the culture in the 60s and the 70s, he necessarily could not stay within that worldview, right? And so he had to kind of expand. And what I found, and we can get into it maybe a little bit later, is that Catholicism has a lot of conservative people also, but there is a very long tradition of Catholicism attempting to reconcile, like science, for example,
Mm-hmm.
like the Jesuit, and then the Jesuits were very, very interested. Like a lot of universities were Jesuit founded. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of them. Like I could Google right now, and you could like rattle off. There's probably I heard of at least 10. There might be even like 30 or 40 for all I know, maybe
Yeah.
even more than that. But there's at least 10 major ones that were Jesuit founded, and then when it comes to things like caring about the poor, the Catholics tended to be in the ethnic urban centers. And in the absence of like a social safety net,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the kind of what we now, and I kind of work in that world now myself, like in the world of like taking care of the poor and taking care of like the mentally unwell and even the addicted, and educating people like cheaply who are poor, and even taking care of the sick and the old. A lot of that fell at the laps of the Catholics. And so there are a lot of like leftist liberal Catholics who have found a way to reconcile and accommodate their politics with their faith in a
Mm-hmm.
way that I think if my parents had been willing and able to explore Catholicism, they may have been able to find more of a home there. Now, my mom did kind of introduce me to certain Catholic ideas and books and Catholic thinkers along the way, but she could never get over that metaphysical leap. That
Mm-hmm.
to me, a lot of it had to do with her own self-sufficiency, like in the sense that she had had a hard life, and I think she felt like trying to give up some of her control to some sort of higher power was actually going to make her less able to survive, if
Gotcha.
that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that would be one of like, again, like I go to Catholic church in like this place that I still live, and the people there are conservative. So it's not as if I'm trying to say Catholics are one politics or another. It's just I've had a complicated relationship with political beliefs myself,
Right.
but I have such a deep part of me that was instilled from an early age to have a sense of like the underdog, and the people that might not have a voice, and the people that might be disadvantaged, that I felt like I needed a place for that to be, but I couldn't go woke. Like the woke it represents a lot of like for me destabilizing energies, that and a lot of the policies and the beliefs and the way that like what is being called for and the way they're describing the world, like I just literally can't in good conscience agree with. I can understand where some of it's coming from and try to understand where the people, and maybe try to negotiate with the people on a local level, but like the way that the world gets conceived, my parents had some of that. They were woke before there was woke. Like they were pretty extreme leftist in some of their beliefs, and like I saw how that converged with a lot of like dysfunction and even mental illness, to be honest with you. And I
Gotcha.
don't know what the causation and correlation is there, but there's something going on there. Like I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, but there was something going on with like having these extreme beliefs where we're just going to destroy society, and we're going to get like take all the money from the rich people and give it to the poor people, and that's going to make everything okay, and we're going to explode things like marriage, and we're going to explode the nuclear family, we're going to explode the tribe and the ethnicity, we're going to explode all these categories and just create this like homogenous, like egalitarian society. And it's just like, I don't know that that's even possible. And trying to make it possible, I feel like can cause chaos and destruction.
Well, not to get
Yeah,
too
sorry.
far. No, you're fine. I just don't want to get too far down like a
Sure.
political route. But like it
Yeah,
sounds like
yeah.
basically like you have a hard time reconciling those views with, I would say, your religious views as far as the morality aspects or things. It seems like
Yeah,
that's kind of what you're touching on.
yeah, and so I found a way to accommodate, like in some ways, what would be considered by a lot of people who are currently lean left would be considered conservative
Mm-hmm.
um, beliefs, with still some things that are more traditional liberal beliefs, like more
Gotcha.
like what like a Democrat would believe in the 1980s or 1990s.
Well, I think the next question was going to be what faith do you believe in, but I think we covered that,
Yeah,
Catholicism and things. And I'd like to touch a little bit on how you found your faith, because it seems like, without referencing which 12-step program, it seems like that was a part of coming back into a belief. Is that correct?
yeah, 100% correct, and so much of what I believe is grounded in like the day, grounded in like organic, and that's why that introduction of that question, you
Mm-hmm.
like it converges perfectly with that question. So in some ways, I might be foreshadowing my answer to that question, but so much of it has to do with where, like, when somebody is on substances, and I was on substances for a little bit, off and on. Like I did get a college education. I actually got advanced degree, and I worked a job, but I was still had like low level substance issues, and then I had other issues, other addictions to like
Mm-hmm.
relationships and stuff like that. But I found myself not able to sustain that, and I was confronted with, well, what am I? How am I going to get out of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a bunch of things very practically that you can do and that work and seem to work for some people, but they seem to inevitably descend into, for lack of a better term, like a religious space. Now,
Gotcha.
a lot of people would not consider them religious. So you get into the like the semantic question about what is religious, but it over time it seemed that engaging in religious ideas became more and more like directly relevant.
Mm-hmm.
They became an, now don't get me wrong, there were a lot of like theological concepts or even religious practices that did not seem to actually help, like,
Right.
because
You're talking about
what
within the program.
yeah, well, I mean, even without the program. So like
Gotcha.
what happened, like, to fast forward, is after I got myself a little bit together, one of the things that, is natural is that there needs to be people that for the next person that's coming along. So I
Mm-hmm.
began to, and still continue to, like, mentor people.
Right.
And then I kind of began, through that, I got a job kind of in drug and alcohol treatment. Now I'm more on the administrative side, but there in that world, I was also confronted with people that were, they were like they were in the low level or high level crises from time to time, and it's like, well, how do you manage those situations? And once even somebody's stabilized, how do you, like, support them in a
Mm-hmm.
journey in a certain direction? And over this, I just celebrated 21 years yesterday.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And it's just the context more. The context of what I'm saying is that it's been 21 years of kind of, or 20 years, because I didn't really do a lot of it in my first year, but for 20 years, I've been trying to help people. And a lot of it began to be informed by, again, it's like I didn't go seeking religion. It's just that, like, things that were organically suggested to me in confronting things like desire and suffering and pain and uncertainty, and trying to calm yourself and trying to, like, organize your day and be disciplined. Like, all these questions, they all have secular answers, don't get me wrong, but it seemed like there were a lot of religious practices and religious concepts that just naturally tended to overlap with a lot of things I discovered that were practically useful. Like, I've had people that, like, serious, and I'm not, when I'm mentoring people, I got to be careful. I'm not providing therapy.
Mm-hmm.
However, was put in a position where I had to kind of try to support people in addition to their substance issues and their mental
Right.
health issues. And in trying to figure out the best way to like at least not harm. Like it's sort of like the Hippocratic Oath, like first do no harm, but also try to at least offer some sort of support. Like I ended up leaning more and more heavily on practices that became discreetly religious, and then over
Gotcha.
time it became like now, like when I go to mass and I think about my life through that lens of Catholic Christianity, it seems more times than not to help me keep myself safe and on the right path, and it seems to help me help other people do that. And I don't know, that could be the placebo effect, or it could be something that's totally explained non-metaphysically, and I'm open to that. But it's working for me.
Right. Well, that's the important thing, I would imagine.
Exactly.
Now, you had said that you did the program yourself, like I guess like 20 years ago. Was that when you came back into the faith as well, or did that happen
No,
over
so
time after?
yeah, so what would happen is I still go to meetings, and we went through the 12 steps in like a workbook, and I went like once you were done, you went back through them again, and we'd write on them and go over them with a sponsor. And so a lot of the people that I originally got, we say clean, like I got clean with, they started experimenting with a lot of like evangelical Christianity. And so I got exposed to it a little bit, but I ran up against certain beliefs that just didn't
You didn't agree with.
Yeah, it just they didn't make sense. I had preconceived, for better or worse, beliefs from my parents that like I didn't like this idea. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to criticize. I'm just saying there's always trade-offs to ideas, and maybe I was taking on the idea in a way that wasn't actually what it's intended. But this idea of being saved, and Catholics don't really believe it that way. They don't conceive of it that way. Either from the layperson's point of view, or even from what's called
Are you talking about like salvation through grace? Just the
okay. Where even people are like, I was saved, so like I
yeah.
got saved, like that kind of language. And then there's a way that people colloquially like talk about it, like informally, like a folk culture you could call it. And then there's the actual theology behind it. And Catholics don't really engage in either, whereas Protestants, certain types of Protestants, including Baptists or evangelicals, will both talk about it in those terms, but there's also some pretty like extensive theology that undergirds it. But for me, this idea we're going to divide people into those who are in the in camp and the out camp, that sounds like that's just ripe for abuse.
Gotcha.
And it's ripe for like marginalizing people and being like, well, we're the good people over here, and look at you late. Like one of the ways it actually, and again, I'm sorry to keep going political, but it's just this is more of a moral issue, and you're confronted with people. You know, I live in the city, and like I wasn't like, we weren't poor, but we weren't wealthy either by any means. We were like lower middle class, right? Working class is what my parents would call it. But you're confronted with people that, you know, don't have the same opportunities, but sometimes they also aren't looking for the opportunities, right? So you have different ways of trying to understand like what's happening there. And a lot of times like a reflexive conservative that view of that often finds itself finding justification in certain types of religious belief is this idea that they just don't want it. They're lazy. They're either lack of willpower or even they are defective. They were born that way. And they are outside grace in a way. And that is so toxic on so many levels to me. And it offends my morality on such a deep level that I can't. Now, not all of them would agree that that's how they see it, and not all of them see it that way. So I'm not trying to paint too broad of a brush, but there are definitely conservatives and then conservative Christians who have spoken about, let's say, you know, especially African American people that live in the cities, in this through using that language through that lens. Like I've read it it pops up everywhere. It's a reoccurring motif in trying to describe, like, let's say, a social problem.
Gotcha. Give me just 1 second. Were you telling me the timer was to the 30-minute mark? So I think if we do run out of time, what I'll do is just restart another Zoom meeting.
Okay, perfect.
And send you the link again. So let me pick up where we were. I think this would be a good spot to get into a little bit more about the God that you actually believe in and
Sure,
your
sure.
impression of that God now. So like we
Yeah,
kind of got your move and the motivation and things, and a little bit of the story through how you came to it. So what would you say, if to the best of your ability, because I think that it's a kind of a hard concept
it is.
to actually put into words sometimes, but to the best of your ability, how would you describe the God that you believe in? Which would it'd be the biblical Christian God.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and it would in a way. And so I think so. I have to like I start with like, and I studied a little bit existentialism. So existentialism, real quickly, is this idea that existence itself is primary, as opposed to traditional societies of all sorts of religious stripes tended to look at the word world as essence being primary. So you could call it spirit,
Mm-hmm.
you could call it essence. There's an essence to things that is first, it's primary.
Mm-hmm.
And Christians, kind of technically speaking, believe that. Whereas existentialists, who most of them tended to be atheists, were like, no, we're kind of like, there's this guy Heidegger had this term in German. He was an existentialist philosopher. He talked about you're just kind of thrown here. You're like thrown into this body in a way, like you're thrown into consciousness. Like, obviously it's a gradual thing. You kind of wake up as whenever, like my first memories when I was 3 years old. Before that, it was kind of like, I wasn't fully conscious, right, in the way that I am now. And I became conscious around somewhere. It was, again, gradual, but like somewhere around 3, I became conscious. And then obviously going through my adolescence, there's more awakenings and through the developmental stages. But there's this idea that you're kind of thrown into the body, and it's like, well, what do you do with that, right? And so for me, that question of like, and it even brings up some pretty like scary and even like triggering. Like I just had this happen with somebody who, a good friend of mine, actually took his own life, but he was there when he was my friend while I was in my addiction, and I was talking about him in reference to my own like story on social media, but it made him look in a certain way. And a friend of mine, his brother, reached out to me. He was like, you're making him look this way because it's been 15 years since he took his own life, but it's still triggering to his family members, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so,
oh yeah.
and so, and so that's almost like a trigger warning, like that I'm about to talk about suicide, in the sense that existentialist philosophers would be like, why not just end it? Like, why would you, like, it's more pain than it's not, right? And it's probably, if you measure that, there's more pain than there is joy or gratification or pleasure. And so I've been face to face with that, both in myself, and then I've actually had to talk to people that were making that decision, like literally on the cusp of making that decision. And I had to like talk through, well, what does it mean to try to stay alive?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not cheap. It's not like you should just live because it's just good. I don't know. What does it mean for it to be good? And so I ultimately have decided in many ways over many times. It's not a decision you make once, right? It's an ongoing decision to continually choose that life is I'm going to choose life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to choose to either like directly take my own life, although I've had those thoughts before, or indirectly through certain behaviors. Because you can make an argument like doing certain substances and going down that path is essentially a way of taking one's own life. And so I know it feels like I'm going off on a tangent, but I'll bring it back. And so, it started first that I needed support in trying to like stay sober, for lack of a better word. But then it became an existential question of, how do I stay in existence? And a lot of what happened, like I thought I was getting sick. I was probably having a midlife crisis about 4 years ago, but there was also physical aspects to it that I had kind of, not treated my body really well. And I kind of been in a fight or flight most of my life, and it had a toll on me. But in that, it was like, I realized that not only did I have to be like abstractly, I'm going to choose life, like I had to actually try to choose joy.
Yeah.
Like if I didn't choose joy, like I was going to like one or two things that happen. I would accelerate my decline, or I may not be able to like stop the decline, but I would make that decline like a form of hell.
Right.
So now I'm kind of like a lot of older people are. Like I'm in this boat where it's like, I don't know if I'm going to live 10 years, 20 years. Like I'm 49. Like given some of the stuff that they encountered, like it can be treated, but it could take me out in the next 10 years. Like living more than 20 years is probably, you know, like not very likely given the kind of, and I'm also 6'6", and tall people just don't live as long. It's just a weird, and so I've had the choices, am I gonna encounter like the remainder of my life in a way where I'm just gonna choose life because I don't want to hurt, I have a daughter who's 27. I don't want to hurt her.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I just do it that way, then I'm gonna end up just being miserable and just hanging on because I don't want to do the wrong thing.
Well,
I
dude,
have to choose.
I don't want to
Sorry.
break your tangent, but I do want to bring it back around to that
So
question. We need to,
in order to seek a life with joy, I've had to conceive of a higher being, and I've begun a relationship in trying to understand what that higher being, what it means,
mm-hmm.
And how that can support me.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, I choose, and it's a faith thing, I choose to try to conceive it as having a form of a personhood, because
mm-hmm.
I've tried ways where it did not have a personhood, and there was a different experience behind it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So
now, do you believe in the Trinity?
Yes, because I think that in a way is helpful to that. So I have this existential dilemma, and then I have the specific existential dilemma of midlife, and then I have the specific existential dilemma of midlife with disease, with a daughter that I don't want to harm. Mm-hmm. Right? So all those conditions around a certain, a bunch of dilemmas, right? Or a bunch of, and thinking of the higher being as having these three parts has utility to confronting, and I don't want to say solving,
mm-hmm.
but helping make my days less likely to descend into sort of hellishness.
I'd like to have a little more on that. You said it has utility, being the three parts in it. How
it does,
so?
Yeah. So if you think about, there's a kind of awesome mystery for anybody, I think, and with what was there before there was anything, right? Mm-hmm. What will be there? Did the universe have a beginning? Well, what was before the beginning? Mm-hmm. Or has it been eternal, right? And I remember as a small child, asking my mom, and this is apparently a pretty common experience, asking my mom, well, where did the world come from? God created it. Well, who created God? And she would joke about this because I was precocious. Right. I was 4 years old. I didn't talk till I was 3, and then I'm asking her about who created the universe, right? And I'm like, no, that can't be. I'm a 4-year-old being like, that doesn't make sense. God was just always there, she said. And I was like, And so whether we believe God was always there, or we believe in the Big Bang, or whatever it is, it's this massive mystery. And so God the Father, in many ways, it fills that space. Gotcha. And so in that way, I remember during COVID having sort of, because when I was small, I would think about these things and I would kind of trip myself out. And I've done hallucinogens. You can trip yourself out, trying to think about, well, where does the universe end? Apparently it curves in on itself. Mm-hmm. Where's the border of the universe? It really can't be infinite, right? And under the pressures of COVID and the lockdown and all that, I started having, I'm like, what if there had never been anything? Trying to conceive of there have never been a universe at all. And literally getting this kind of existential dread that I was like, I can't think about that. I'm tripping myself out too much. And that feels like God the Father is in that space. It's a mystery, but it's some sort of first cause. According to classic theology, they believe in the first principle, the first cause. I think you're familiar with that argument. It's adjacent to that. I didn't come to this belief through that. It's more came to the belief, and then that helps me understand it.
Gotcha.
God the Son would be, of all the religions, there was one where, and it's not as if there hasn't been gods that have come down to earth in other traditions, but a God that came down and participated in human suffering. Mm-hmm. Jesus, and so.
All right, we had a little hiccup there because I'm cheap and have not paid for a membership to Zoom, so I'll probably end up having to do that if I'm going to make this a thing. But let's pick back up where you were talking about. I think you were talking about the sun at the moment.
Yeah, and so, in a way, what I'm asked to do is think of him as a historical figure who, in the way that we see the world scientifically, especially today, it's either he rose from the dead or he didn't. Was death conquered or not, right? And I'm not going to lie and say that there isn't a little bit of tinge of agnosticism about that, but I don't necessarily feel like it's hugely relevant whether that actually happened. And because I'm a big believer in this idea that if somebody says something's just a symbol, I don't think they understand symbols.
Gotcha.
Like to say something's just a symbol, that actually packs in or smuggles in like actually like a materialist bias. And I'm not saying materialism is a wrong way. It's actually a legitimate way to see the world,
Right.
but it's not the only way.
Right.
And so it's kind of like preferencing an empirically understood version of the world at the exclusion of like things that like I am a trained creative writer. Like I'm a poet. Like I do hip hop music a little bit, not as much anymore. I I traffic in the symbolic, and a lot of that is it's related to dreams, it's related to our passions, it's related to that existential space. It's like in the domain of consciousness. It's not something that you can tie down tie down like materialistically. Like it's in this there's a metaphysical realm to our consciousness as our consciousness engages in the world and with each other, right? Now, whether that has its own like life or vitality that persists after death, like I don't know if that's as important as acknowledging that it exists. So the metaphor of Christ, even if it's just a symbol, is there's so much that I could go into. What I want to say about it though is that there are what is called like perennialists, or there's something called ecumenism, and there's something called universalism. They're all different kinds of ways where they're like all religions have truth. As far as I understand, and there's obviously lots of ways to like unpack this, the Catechism of the Catholic Church finds a way to accommodate that we believe that the Bible and the Trinity are the best way to approximate, the best way to understand as human beings, as incomplete human beings, the completeness and the allness, the fullness of the universe. However, it doesn't mean that there aren't other ways. It's not about them being right or wrong. It's in different ways they are valid too, but we ultimately believe that in the fullness of the tradition, in the fullness of the beliefs, that we're constantly co-creating in some ways. Like that's why the Jesuits wanted to do universities, because it's not like these questions always get settled or have been settled. And so we're not saying that other people can't be saved or they can't be in relationship to God. And that foreshadows the other question, like what happens after we die? Like, it's not saying that they, like people that live a different like religious tradition other than Christianity can't enter into a relationship with God in a way that is, they get to be with God after they die, whatever that fully means. It's more that there's going to be a little bit incomplete in there. Now, there's going to be stuff incomplete in our practice. And a lot of critics would be like, well, that's a distinction or a difference or a distinction, not a difference. And I get that. But at the same time, it's sort of like it's looking at the world as a very long list of different questions that are implicated in our beliefs, rather than there's like one or two questions. Like, is this true or is it not? Are you going to believe it or are you not? And I think a lot of, particularly the evangelical Christians, they reduce their Christianity to like, is this true or is it not? Are you going to believe it or are you not?
Right.
And like, it just doesn't make sense to my experience, how I came to religion. I don't think that the questions that emerge out of these like ideas and these facts of being here, like that you can boil them down to those two things. Like, I don't, even if you do accept them as first principles, like how do you apply them? Like the application is, I don't say infinite, but depending on like the different culture and the subculture and the person and the individual and the different energies and challenges that we all face in our lives, like the application is so abundant that I don't know that being like, this is the truth and you believe it or not, like is necessarily the right way to like start. Because then it makes people think that all they got to do is just, I've encountered them, and listen, if it works for them, it works for them. But it feels like they just like, this is true. I'm going to keep saying it's true. I'm going to get with other people that we're going to ritualize saying it's true, which has power. It's sort of like going to a concert. Like, it's almost like music to it. It's like, this is true. I go to a Bible study where sometimes we descend into that. We're like, this is true. This is true. And I'm not mocking them. But for me, I'm like, well, how is it true?
Yeah.
Like I engage in my own suffering and people that are suffering around me, and I want to know, how is this true in relationship to that? Like I if you're not applying it, like, I don't know what it fully means. Now, I'm not saying you have to apply it, but I feel like you are applying it even if you don't acknowledge. Because how are you treating your wife when you go home? How are you treating your coworkers? You know what I mean? So it's,
Yeah.
if we're not talking about how it's being applied, it doesn't seem like it's real to me.
And I do want to,
So,
that's actually funny that you're getting
sure,
into that and practice, because that's going to be the next question. But there were two
sure.
points that you had made that I do want to go back to before we move on. One, it does sound like that you're not like making it an either or. Either
No,
you believe this or you suffer forever or something
right.
like that.
No.
You have a more I think it was a universalist. I'm not sure the terminology, honestly. I'll be perfectly frank. But you think that there's more of a, there's this path, but you can also get here going down this path.
It's less likely, I would argue.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as if all the paths are equal,
Gotcha.
but like which ones are closer is open.
Gotcha.
But I would say like I don't conceive them as all being equal. I do think there is a condition or a state
Okay.
of being separated from God, but I don't know exactly how it's not one formula to being confined to it or being
Right.
put in it, right? Like I mean, I've sine it. Like I've been in like a state of like the way that I was living, because I've done some dark things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I've had to like atone for, like you know, and you know, nothing that is going to get me like is
Yeah,
going to like
we'll
get
just
me
leave it there at
investigated,
that, yeah.
but you know what I'm trying to say
Yep.
in some ways, that like and even stuff that is not illegal, but was just like downright wicked, for
Mhm.
lack of a better word. Like I would violate other people, and
Gotcha.
I've been violated too, but that doesn't make it right. And so being in that space of pain from having been violated, and then the pain, but also the responsibility of being a violator. And there's obviously like a lot of overlap sometimes, because people will violate each other in certain types of relationships.
Mm-hmm.
That is a state of emotional and psychological. That's an emotional psychological state that I feel like has a persistence across our lives. Now, what, like, up until when we die, it's that powerful. And so could it persist past our death? Yeah, because like it's actually more important than our physical bodies. If you think
Gotcha.
about it, it's our legacy, it's our impact on other people, it's
Mhm.
how we feel in those moments, it's how we spend our last days, right? Like, and how we spend our days now, right? Like what our life ultimately is in terms of how it has an impact on like this thing that's unfolding in front of us, like the universe and the world
Mhm.
and human beings.
The other thing that I wanted to go to, and it was way back, you would talk a little bit about the resurrection,
Yeah.
and it seemed like that you had kind of implied a little bit that it might be more allegorical than something that might have actually happened, and that you didn't think that it was necessarily important whether it did actually happen or not. And I wanted to know if you would just elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, so I think the importance of it, I'm open that that I haven't yet been taught by people that might understand it
Mm-hmm.
differently than me, how important it is.
Gotcha.
Um, but I don't know that it's the final importance. It's not the sticking point for
Mm-hmm.
me. Um, I need to be careful, and I don't need to be careful. I want to be honest about what I believe.
Yeah.
I don't want to just say something because I'm afraid that it's going to mean that I just like set myself outside my tradition. Like I don't want to be like, well, if I don't believe it, now I can't really claim to be a Catholic.
Right.
But I don't want to believe it just so I can claim to be a Catholic, right? And
Right.
so,
Right.
but I do think that there's a kind of ask of me to try to accept it, to try. It's real interesting. Um, um, I'm kind of talking to, like, on a dating level, I'm kind of talking to somebody, and these issues come up in that, where it's
Mhm.
like we're like asking each other to trust each other in some ways.
Right.
And and she's afraid, and so she's like throwing up like barriers, and I'm like, if you keep throwing up barriers, you're gonna make this not work.
Mhm.
Like it's not the only factor in making it work or not work, but it can be a powerful factor in not making it work. Like, you need to accept that this is possible on some level for it to work at all. And then if you accept it more fully, it's more likely you're going to do the things that are going to make it work. Again, it's not the only factor. There's actual real other energies that we don't choose. Like, what if we're not compatible?
Yeah.
But if we do turn out to be compatible, like living up to like a vision that this might be true is something that's almost necessary. And I've been kind of asking her to do that because I'm like arguing. I'm like, if you don't do that, it's going to go the other way. It's not going to stay static where you're like, I'm just hanging on and like waiting for you to get ready. It's like, it's going to go the other way. You're not going to be attracted to me if I just sit here and wait. Like you put me in the friend zone, you're going to see me as a friend. In other words, like, so it's just, I don't want to like make an analogy between that and accepting the, I feel bad.
You're good.
But some Christians will be like, how dare you? But the point is, it's more the mechanics. It's not the importance of it. Obviously, for me, accepting, and maybe I just stumbled on something. Maybe that's more important. Maybe I shouldn't be worried about what this woman and me are doing. I should be worried about whether I believe in the resurrection or not. But I mean, I believe it's possible. Like, I conceive of God the Son in the terms of like this Platonic thinking, like the logos, he was the logos. And going back to the idea about creativity and symbols and like the generativity of ideas, like how ideas can gather material things together underneath them and move things. So, you know, like Nazism was a set of ideas, and look what it galvanized, like horrific things, like millions of people doing horrific things or accepting horrific things.
Yeah.
And so like for the universe to like coalesce into one person, a lot of that generative power and like the goodness and the truth of it. And there's this idea that it's like, and this borrows from Aristotle, I think, but the idea of the true, the good, and the beautiful, that these are all like different sides of the same diamond, different facets of the same diamond. And so for the universe to like coalesce all that is, not all that is, but forces that are part of what makes things true and makes things beautiful and makes things good, for all that to be coalesced into one human being, if that were possible to do, would that human being not be able to like transcend death? I think they probably would be able to. Now, is that magical thinking? It might be. It might be. I'm talking about a miracle. But
well, I mean, it would be on par with other things that are in the Bible, because there's a lot of miraculous events in the Bible. So
Absolutely.
Like, it wouldn't be out of the range of possibility for what they're setting up.
Yeah, and I think there are, and this is maybe a cheap thing, and it's not that robust, but I think it's robust enough, it's powerful enough. But this idea of like, you know, there's quantum like things that we're encountering that are like they don't fit into our materials paradigm, scientific, empirical, maybe not empirical, materialist paradigm that we like. There's spooky action at a distance on a quantum level, apparently. Like, and a lot of people want to seize on that and be like, look, it's evidence for the spirit world. And I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is it's not, to me, inconceivable. Now, and this is where I totally understand the objections of the skeptics, is that in absence of that, like being there, like how can I assert? And if you want, I can go into like one of the ways that I feel like I can accommodate that. I don't know if I've gone too far afield. If you want to redirect it back to the questions.
Well, I think, I don't know. You can go ahead. Let's go ahead.
Right, I'm just gonna make a real quick idea, like, and it might be a little nerdy, but it's like we live in like the mass like media era, and the mass media era probably started about 150 years ago. Like I think there was newspapers like 200 years ago, but they just kept like, and then advertising and a kind
definitely
of advanced,
not the type of media we have now. And
exactly.
Within the past century.
But it's proliferated, and it's proliferated with a form of free market activity, right? And there's a variety of free market activity, like mass marketing, advertising, and then there's political behavior that has piggybacked on that and used it. You could argue, some people would argue that the political was actually the thing that was driving it primarily, but there's levers of power, there's different interest groups, there's different actual politicians that have been like using mass media, but then there's also like indirect cultural control that we want to assert over each other, locally or on a broader scale. And if you put that all together, a lot of times what people in essence are kind of like gravitating towards when they're talking about, you know, whether or not these things are true, is it goes back to what you rightly said that I don't believe in, which is the idea you either believe in it or you don't. You either believe in it or you're going to hell. It's this idea. It's like in postmodern thinking, it's like narratives are power, and it feels like a power play that other humans are doing on other people. And even if we're not making the power play ourselves, we're borrowing the language of it. So it's kind of like what I'm trying to say is it's almost like you have to. What skeptics recoil from is a move where, again, it's like, why do I need to tell you that you're going to hell? Like, why do I need to like assert that this is the only truth like that exists? Like, why do I need to like, it's this totalitarianism in a sense. It's this, and I study propaganda, and propaganda, one of the propaganda fallacies is you're either for or against this. Like Joseph Goebbels like used that. He's like, you're either for the Nazi regime or you're against it. George Bush did that when he was justifying the Iraq war. He's like, you're either for us or you're against us. It's like, why do I need to frame it that way? Like, what utility? Can't I just quietly and lovingly say, no, this is what I believe. If you want to know what I believe, you can come to mass and we'll have a conversation. Like, I don't need to, this is borrowing from the woke, but I think the woke can have some good ideas, even though on net and on whole, I disagree with most of what they say. This idea of colonizing, like, it's a colonizing move to be like, you either believe in this miracle and believe in the Bible or you're going to hell. And it's like, I don't conceive of that truth in that, on that scale, in a way that I feel like I need to like make a statement across the entire human species. Like that just, it's too big of a scale. It's like, well, I know people that are Muslim and that's working for them in their own framework. Now, again, I will advocate that my tradition has an abundance and a richness that makes me want to choose this tradition. And it's tricky because I don't want to say that they're wrong. I would say maybe they're incomplete, possibly incomplete. I don't know. I don't know how to fully conceive of it. I don't want to not defend my belief, and I don't want to speak to its merits, but speaking to its merits is a longer project than just saying this is correct and you should believe it, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for indulging that.
No, you're good. You're good. And I think that's good. So you had mentioned mass. I guess the next thing that we were going to ask was like, and just briefly, what sort of way do you practice your faith in like a day-to-day way? A day-to-day. I know that Catholicism has a lot of things like mass and communion, of course, and different things like that. So if you could just, a little bit about how you practice it day to day.
Yeah, and so it will come down to like I try to go to mass once a week. There are certain behaviors, and I don't want the word sin is so loaded, but what get called in my tradition sins that I'm trying to figure out like where the line is, because it's not easy to be like, well, where that line is, or even if I'm willing to accept all of them. And I don't want to get into detail, but people, it's a thing that men notoriously struggle with. Well, people in general are struggling with it in our culture now, but it's a certain variety of activity that isn't ideal. At best, it isn't ideal. At worst, it can be like corrosive, like an addiction, right? Or it can like change your perceptions and your motivations in a way that is not healthy, right? Even if it's not addictive, it's still like massively overloading your sensory, inputs, and it's changing what you want, like what my motivations on a daily basis, like what I'm putting in the highest priority. Like, am I taking care? Like, I have a bunch of different goals and I have a bunch of different relationships, and like, where are they falling in how I spend my time and my energy and my focus? It can like derange, and technically speaking, in Catholic Church, it's called disorders it. It like these things disorder you. Like, there's a disordered sexuality, they can argue. Now, so I've delineated that, and I'm getting to a place. So if I cross a certain line, and also if I cross the line with anger and anxiety, I feel like I have to go confess it.
Gotcha.
And so I confess it, and then that, I feel like that helps me conceive of where my lines are with my behaviors. Doesn't mean I'm not going to go over the line again, because then I'll go back to confession. But it's not like I can just go, I'll just go back to confession. I got to make a good faith effort to try to deal with the behavior. But
gotcha.
You understand what? Yeah. And so that's important. And like the prayers have become like the two prayers that I'll do, like I don't necessarily do the rosary, which is a very ritualized thing that it combines like the prayer to Mary as well as the Lord's Prayer. I mostly do the Lord's Prayer, but a couple times I'll do the rosary prayer. And you know, it's been pointed out to me that the Lord's Prayer has practical power in terms of how it helps lay out like what is in front of you. Now the language can be loaded, but this idea, it's like, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Like thy will be done in a way is like, I'm one person and I pretty routinely don't know what's best for me. Like I have to collaborate with all sorts of other like people and ideas and parts of myself. Like we're a series of selves in many ways. Like we're not just one self. And then currently, but also across time. And so this idea that there could be a larger will that is better than my will, it makes sense. And so the idea that that will actually be done, like, again, going, and I hate to compare it, but for me, like relationships, like I'm 49, like I've never been able to get the stability of a long-term marriage, and I've always wanted it, but I've never been able to do it. So it's very important to me. And marriage is a sacrament in the Catholic Church. So I'm not necessarily comparing the divine to just me trying to date a woman, because it's actually supposedly what I'm supposed to do in some ways. But this idea that we're kind of negotiating, and I'm an insecure attacher. And so like I've been throwing some energy at her. I'm like, hey, get with me. I like you. I almost love you. Like, why don't you want to love me? And it's actually in some ways the way human beings are animals. Can be off-putting. It's submissive in a way, right? I don't want to play dominance games either. I'm like, I'm going to dominate you because I don't want to be submissive. But I found myself instead trying to negotiate from a point of strength, and like my religious faith, and it's encapsulated. It's both informed but also impacted by the Lord's prayers, is the idea that God's will be done. Like basically I had to say to her, because she's kind of like, I'm not a fan of false choices, because you talk about it, you're either for us or against us, but there does become crossroads in certain situations. So it's like, it's not going to be sustainable for her to be like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. Eventually it's going to be like, do your thing or get off the pot, not to be vulgar.
No, I get
right.
it.
And so, but my thing, I had to say it to her, and I didn't I didn't want to do it as a power move, but it was important to negotiate from a point of strength. I kind of said to her, because what happened was I tried to put some things in place, because basically she's avoiding me and not talking to me. I'm like, well, that means I don't think you like me. And so let's just not do this. But then you're saying you like me, like you're giving me mixed signals. So I'm like, all right, if you're not ready, we'll put some things in place. You know, there's some minimal things. Like we probably have to talk once a week. We need to hang out once a month. Like, if you get to a place where you're too depressed or too overwhelmed from your job to really communicate with me, we're going to have to take a break, because otherwise I'm going to be sitting here not knowing why you aren't communicating with me. And so she wrote back and said, these are all great parameters where I don't feel like I'm being pressured. And I kind of got triggered by the word pressure, so I wrote her back, because last night I broke up with her essentially. And she was like, no, give me another chance. So I wrote back. I'm like, nobody's pressuring you. Like, I will you wanted to come back with me, like I would just be friends with you. And I really, really, really like this person, and I would have never had the power. And I'm not saying it's coming from God in some magical way, but this idea where I was like, I'll just be friends with you. Like I will learn to live with that, because I actually care about you as a person. I don't want to ruin. We were friends for a couple of years before this, not close, but we had our close moments over the years. And so like God's will be done, like what will be, what is best for us, me and her might not know for each other yet. And this idea that I can get this something that is so powerful and I want it so much, like for me to be able to surrender, that is the technical term, both in like the 12-step programs, but also in some Christian. And it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be spiritual or religious. It's just this idea, like I got to let go of some control over this.
Do you find,
and believe that?
Sorry, go ahead.
Please jump
I was just
in.
Say, do you find the concept of surrender to be a day-to-day thing, that like there's
absolutely
on both, like probably, I don't know if macro and micro would be the right words there, but like on big levels and small levels in the day-to-day life, do you find the concept of surrender to the belief and to the God a thing that you put into practice?
100%. And I want to stay on the rituals or the daily practices.
Yeah, you're good.
But it's like fascinating, because like I grew up like in this like it was basically right on the edge. So very, very ethnically divided. There was like, black neighborhoods. There were like, by the time I got there, like the white neighborhoods had kind of started to like merge with each other. But even just 20 years before, like in the 60s, there were still like Polish neighborhoods, Irish neighborhoods, Italian neighborhoods. And I grew up where it was mostly Italian Irish with some South and East Asians mixed in. And then later African Americans moved in, but they were actually like pretty like forcefully kept out. And so we were right on the edge. And so there were probably worse white neighborhoods and definitely worse black neighborhoods where I grew up. But we were like the neighborhood I grew up was like the next up from the worst white neighborhood. Gotcha. So it was like pretty persistent violence to the point where my mom was like, yeah, she grew up in Appalachia where it was a lot of poverty, because a lot of people want to blame violence on poverty, but it's more like income inequality and being like, I grew up in a row home. Like we're on top of each other. There's these skyscrapers looming over us. And I share all this is because this role of masculinity and like when it's appropriate to defend yourself, when it's appropriate to use force, when it's appropriate to like, assert certain types of masculine energies, like the assertiveness versus aggressiveness. All these things are informed by the Christianity, like both in terms of like the ideas, but also the practice. And there's a balancing act. And part of the surrender sometimes is I developed like a bunch of defense mechanisms where, I was at a meeting the other night and this one guy was peacocking, and he's a guy that like from the streets and he has a problem, but he's kind of been also like not just a user, but maybe like a provider, but also like a felon. Right. And he's sitting there glorifying violence on people that don't look like him. And he's in an environment where it's like, and my thing is I want to protect the people in that space. My thing is I will challenge you and call you out. And because I can look at him and be like, he's actually, the real ones don't broadcast it. They just do it. Right. So he's just trying to impress people in the rooms, and he doesn't feel good about himself because he's 50 years old and he still has a substance problem. And he has other men paying for his rent because the government's paying for him to live at a recovery house. But me, I want to go in there and be like, but my thing is you don't start a fight like that because they could get the drop on you. So actually the only real way to actually deal with it would be actually just to initiate violence immediately. And I'm not going to do that. It's illegal and unethical. But it's literally, I'm trying to think of how to respond to this, because it's like you are trying to intimidate people in this space. And I know you're not about that life. And I'm not the toughest guy, but I know I can take you. And it's like, I was not provided that right to do that, or even to ask that question, because my parents became pacifists. And so therefore I was preyed upon. And so I had to develop a sense of how to protect myself, but I don't know the boundaries around it. And then even the way that like I engage with women, like this other one's not necessarily, it's not working out. And I was talking to multiple ones before her. Like I could go like try to play the field and talk to multiple ones, and that would feel masculine and that would feel like strength. And at work, like I'm a supervisor, like I could like try to throw my weight around, and I have to like constantly figure out like where the lines are in this. And I have to try to like have empathy and compassion for all these other individuals and for myself. And I have to accommodate multiple needs and wants, and the needs of other people, the demands of the situation. I got to try to stay as close to the reality of a situation. So I need to know what's actually true about the situation. Then I need to know what generally within a certain framework, what is the right thing to do within the situation. Gotcha. And all of that is very complex things. Now, some people are able to like accomplish that, and they don't need any kind of religious faith to be involved in that at all. But I think they're doing certain things in their lives that you could observe and you could find parallels with. Me, I need that larger framework. It's like, all right, I have all this to do. Like, I don't want to break the law. I don't want this guy threatening people. I don't want the person that works under me to like walk all over me. But I also realize that if I try to exert myself, it might have a backlash, and there's not much you can do. Be careful. Like, the short-term solution can create a long-term problem. Like, there's all these things, and then there's the emotions and the physiology that's all involved. And to be able to like lower the physiological reaction through a kind of almost meditative ease and a belief that things are going to be generally okay, and get to a place where my cognition, there's a sweet spot when people are too activated and too anxious, they don't perform well. If they're not activated enough, they don't perform well. There's like a bell curve. And to be able to get it to the place where I can pay attention to the world in a way that I feel like I'm playing like a relatively like positive and growth-based role in it, it's like the religious practices are just like right in the middle of that. Like,
Gotcha.
and they just keep giving to it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, right now we're getting ready to go into probably the second half of the questions, which
Sure.
are all based on, I guess, the faith and the things that you think about the world out of that, I guess. I do want to let you know that it did give me the little timer, so we probably have like 10 minutes, then we'll have to start another one.
Okay.
So whenever that clicks off, I'll just hit you with another a link. So the next question would be, what to you would be the best evidence for this God existing, if anything, other than like, because I'm sure that there's a lot of personal experience, but I'm sure you understand that personal experience doesn't necessarily between
No.
people give really
No,
good
no,
evidence.
it
So
doesn't. It
is there
doesn't.
something that you would say might be the best? Yeah, this is something I'd point to that could be decent evidence or
Yeah, and so
argument.
this answer,
Anything.
yeah, so this answer is going to, in some ways, like make me sound like I'm lukewarm about my specific faith, but
Mhm.
I'm not. I just don't know that we have the right words.
Gotcha.
And I feel like
Yeah.
my tradition helps me get close enough to the right words and the right actions, both the words and the actions.
Mhm.
But there's something about like, like, as animist religions, like the word, the root
Yeah,
word
yeah.
is animate, right? This idea that like I don't know if you've ever been to a funeral. Like I've
Oh,
had
yeah.
like, yeah, I've had like younger people like from overdoses and suicides, and one of them was actually I dated her, and then she died of an overdose at 25. It was really tragic. And like seeing their body and seeing the difference between that body and then, the corpse, and even
Yeah.
like I had to put down the dog, and then I was there as the dog like was euthanized.
There is a difference that you can absolutely see and
Exactly.
tell. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. 100%.
Now that brings up the tricky question of like, if we have souls, then do it. The animals must necessarily. Right? Like, so, and I don't know that the Christianity, like apparently when I was deciding, I actually Googled that, like, what is the Catholic position on like animals? And it was like, basically we should treat them like it's acknowledging that they can suffer. And so therefore we should minimize the suffering that they have to endure.
So
right.
would
Yeah.
you pinpoint that as the thing that you think is evidence?
That
for
would
you
be a
that-
starting point, and then
Yeah.
we get to, and I think this might be a presuppositionalist argument.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the presuppositionalist argument, I think, makes the most sense to me. This idea of, but even here's the thing. So a lot of times in the materialist framework, particularly the Darwinian framework, there's this idea of emergence, and what's smuggled in there is this idea that emergence, like necessarily, means that there's no order to the universe, because it appears as if we're going from disarray to order. It looks like we're emerging, like coherent life and order is emerging from the absence of such.
Now, when you're
right?
talking about the presup and emergence thing, you're talking about like when they say properties like logic or morality and things are emergent out of consciousness, that sort of thing.
That would be the presuppositional argument, but
I mean, like,
even
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No.
didn't
I
mean
was
to
just
cut
going to
you
say that even if we like put that aside for a second and we like accepted like what seems to be the argument coming from the more materialistic, agnostic, or atheist side is often, and maybe they can account for this, and I just haven't heard it. Like, I'm open that they can account for what I'm about to describe. But it feels like to me that there's this idea that because, say, something like consciousness is simply emergent, like we had a soup, and from that soup, like complexity kept like stacking, from microorganisms all the way up now to human beings. And there was nothing before that had any like teleos the way we have teleos. No, autopoiesis is another technical term. There was no like entropy fighting phenomena.
Gotcha.
There was no phenomena that was really objecting to entropy. Like, entropy was the rule. Life seems to be a sort of strange exception to entropy, right? And this idea that means that therefore entropy is the rule, and this is a secondary like consequence of entropy, and therefore that does not broach any possibility for there to be like organizing principles in the universe or first principles. I don't know that that follows from the evidence, because there could be mechanisms that, and again, I'm not saying this is, because to say there's things that we can't yet understand or not able to understand can feel like a cop out, and maybe it is, but I feel like we have to be at least open. Now, this doesn't confirm God, but it at least to me throws into a little bit of doubt for me, agnosticism.
What is good at, what is the best evidence? Just to
yeah, and so this idea that like I'm still open that, you know, these emergent phenomena in Catholicism, going back to this idea of there just being connections between the true, the good, and the beautiful. There's this idea of art, and like the way things can be structured. And this is going to be hard to like put into words, but I don't know that like the bodies are vessels. Like, I don't know that that's quite the metaphor, but it's like, it's more like there's like what people, and this is a cheap way, like there's divine geometry. Like there's certain combinations of the elements of the universe that when they're like somehow assembled together, they gather teleos to them. Right? Like they, and there's multiple, like they're very like fractal, and they're not like linearly understood, but they could be understood. Like AI might be able to understand them, but they're like, they have curves, and they fold in on each other, and there's spirals. Like their geometry is not like the standard, like, you know, like a flat piece of paper.
Yeah.
Like geometry. And so there's this the idea that there's these patterns in the universe that in of themselves tilt the phenomena that we're experiencing. There's not just two directions, and this is the same problem earlier. It's not like towards good or towards bad, like that's simple, but it's like there are qualitative differences in the ways that certain things come together in order, like how that orients. So I remember when I was studying creative writing, there's this idea how content meets form. And there was this painting by, I think, Goya, and it was a scene of, I think, the Spanish Civil, or it might have been Napoleonic Wars, but it was a scene of an execution, like by firing squad. And on the left, the executioners holding the guns pointing towards our right. They were painted in a way that you could actually see them, like with detail. They seem more alive. And as you move the right towards the bullets and the people like getting hit by the bullets, it became more amorphous and wispy. So it was like the form of the painting was it was using the form in order to like to present content. Right. And so aesthetics in a way like merge with, again, like my thing is, another argument, it is a presupposition argument, is that people they can talk about their like moral choices as being like simply like selective forces, but I don't know that they fully see them that way. Like gotcha. I've never encountered a person who had like, except maybe somebody with a personality disorder or on drugs, who'd be like, yeah, you know, that person violated my rights and my trust, and you know, but that's just their competitive urge that was like birthed out of a million years or a billion years of evolution. And so it's just evolution.
I don't want to cut
he's
you
just
off,
trying to survive.
We're less than a minute here, so I'm going to close this Zoom meeting. I'm going to close this Zoom meeting. I'm going to grab a drink real quick, and then I'll send you another link.
I'll do that too. Awesome.
So we'll move on. I think we only have, there's only like 3 questions left, because the very last one is just about whether or not you could change your mind, and that's pretty much a short yes or no. So
sure.
So moving on, according to your belief, or at least your personal belief, why do you think the world has suffering, and how does that reconcile with your belief with Catholicism?
Yeah, and so there's this idea that because of free will, that that accounts for a certain variety of suffering. Now,
Right.
for a while, I didn't understand how that connected to things like natural suffering. So like, it can account for like the suffering that comes from human beings' misdeeds, but
Right.
like why, like a hurricane comes or like cancer or something like that. Like what, like the suffering that emerges out of those conditions. But
Let's hone
apparently,
in on that one. Let's hone
yeah,
in on, because
yeah,
I definitely know the free will aspect of it. Why do you think that? How
yeah.
does it
So I
reconcile with
think the
natural?
argument from my intuition, I know that in the Catholic tradition they've actually gone in depth about this. I know that
Mm-hmm.
I haven't gone in depth the way in their attempt to go in depth.
Mm-hmm.
But my intuition would be that they have a category. I think it might be natural something. Like it's not natural causes, but it's something like natural causation or something to that effect, where there's this idea that if the arena is being manipulated, that necessarily is going to constrain the free will too. So the
Gotcha.
world has to have a certain type of play.
Gotcha.
Like there has to be like a certain chaos mental entropy. Like there has to be a certain degree of entropy to afford the human ability to have free will.
Okay. So
That would be the argument.
it influences free, or it's not influenced by free will, but the setup has to be in such a way that it impacts free will. Is that kind of?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, the two to go in hand in hand, because it'll almost be like, well, if God swooped in and made it so there was no such thing as as cancer, like, well, did he get rid of cancer?
Mm-hmm.
Like, or there's no such thing as hurricanes anymore? Like, I guess. And this could be like a pushback, like, well, why not? Of course, you could have maybe you could have a world and a universe where the only suffering only came directly from free will. I don't, there could be some sort of part of, I'm not a big fan of thinking that God's like sitting there like a human being going, let me decide. But in the logic or the rationale, that there's rationality there, and there is in essence there's intelligibility. So in the intelligible decision tree, there might be some sort of utility to there being earthquakes. Like,
Gotcha.
and that's often it's cheap. That feels cheap to me sometimes. I don't feel like it attends to the people, like when they're like get swept away, like when their loved ones gets buried under an earthquake. Like I don't know that they're like, oh well, that was, God had a reason for your loved one to get buried under that. Like it's God's will. There's when one door closes, another opens.
Yeah.
Like it feels very cheap and not satisfying. And so that's been one of my stumbling blocks, is that very issue. Like it's the classical problem of evil. Like if there's all powerful, all good, all knowing God, why is there evil? And the idea of free will being, it accounts for some of it, and then maybe can account for the other aspects, but there's a mystery in there that often makes me question maybe the all goodness of God.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least maybe God is good, not in the necessarily the sense that we might be familiar with. And I've heard some Protestants make arguments like that indirectly. I don't think that they realized that that's what they were doing,
Mm-hmm.
but they seem to like suddenly like throw in like a very non-Christian, like non-Western, non-secular humanist kind of morality that was just it was incompatible. Like they accounted for some, and this is some of the stuff me and Seth or I'm sorry,
John.
me and
yeah.
Are going to talk about, but they'll account for some of the atrocities, like the war crimes, what we would call war crimes in the Old Testament. They're like, oh well, God was trying to like wipe out future evil, like
Gotcha.
by exterminating children.
You're talking about like
so those children aren't going to
Amalekites, Midianites, those things
exactly.
in numbers,
And it's like, I'm not saying that you can't make that argument, but I'm saying that there's a very stark and qualitative difference in the internal logic of the moral system that you need to make that argument. When over here you're agreeing with me that we shouldn't hurt people unnecessarily, right? Like same thing with the war. It was this idea that suddenly people become game theorists with Iran, when like 10 minutes ago they were, no, we shouldn't, like we don't broach aggressive violence within our culture. Like now that doesn't mean that we can't, that the rules aren't going to shift a little bit between nations, but they shouldn't shift that dramatically where you're suddenly making arguments that are honestly coming from like a geopolitical, like an amoral geopolitical framework that
Gotcha.
is game theoretic. Like if we don't do it, someone else will do it. Like in other words, like if we're not dominant in a way, that's going to cause other people are going to be dominant, and it's either us or them. Like that doesn't sound like a Christian argument to me. And I've heard Christians make that to justify preemptive, aggressive action against Iran.
Right.
And I'm not trying to get political. I'm just saying some of the arguments to do it seem compelling. I'm not gonna sit here and say that they aren't. There could be a moral argument to some sort of clear and present danger. I don't trust the government when they say that they were dangerous, and it doesn't make sense that they would. Anyway, I'll stop.
No,
It
you're
doesn't make
fine.
sense.
And I do want to say, you said that you didn't want to get political, but I do think that especially now, it's
Sure.
very hard to separate the two in society.
It is.
It's all getting conflated. Like if you're talking about politics, sometimes religion will just like bleed right into it, and vice versa. If you're talking about religion, politics will bleed right into it. They're kind of going hand in hand a lot more now. So, but yeah, that. I think that covers that one. So, according to your belief, and both on both sides of it, what do you think happens when we die? Like, as far as like, what's your understanding of what heaven is going to be like for the believers and things, and what do you think happens, according to your belief, to the non-believers?
So the survivability of our personality after the body undergoes what we call death seems very hard to understand.
Oh yeah.
Now that there is this idea about the bodily resurrection, which would make a little bit more sense, because and this goes back to this idea about like the way that the forms relate to content. Like from my understanding, and I really like believe in a lot of like what are at least semi-science. I mean, there's some scientific rigor to it, but a lot of like in the world of psychology and therapy, there's a lot like in the last 20 years about the way that the body and the way that the body processes like its stress hormones, its dopamine, serotonin, like attention and motivation, like all that stuff. Like I'm very acquainted with it for my own like therapeutic journey, but also in trying to support other people's in theirs. And so this idea that we're going to disembody something that clearly there's hardware, like there's the hardware related to this material world, and there's the material properties of this hardware that if you're going to separate consciousness, like now I'm not saying consciousness as some sort of essence couldn't be separated, but the idea that somehow there's going to be some sort of imprint of your consciousness onto the essence, I don't know. The only thing that makes me a little open to it is this idea of dreams, and some cultures have believed that dreams were an access to the spirit world. The amount of information that seems to be involved with constructing dreams does not seem to correspond to the amount of information that I've received through my sensory inputs. Like,
Gotcha.
in other words, it feels like there's scenarios, like my subconscious brain must be like one of the best, and maybe all human beings are. We just are not able to access it except in mere exceptions. I'm like one of the best like fiction writers. My subconscious brain is the best fiction writer that has ever lived. Because it's like these weird
like
worlds
dreams?
that I don't recognize. Yeah, I'm constantly traveling to like some versions of a life that like has features that feel as real. You ever move to a new place and you have new neighbors or have a new job, and suddenly they're like the days of your life take on a different routine, so it comes together in a sort of spirit or an aura, like an atmosphere, and it's qualitatively different than another season. Like you can almost demarcate it because the people, places, and things are different. It's like I go to in a dream and it's like I just moved somewhere and started in a new phase or season. But I've never been to that place. It doesn't have that feeling. And so the idea that maybe our brains or whatever's involved with making our consciousness could somehow, that there's some sort of connection to something greater that our individual conscious could have to some other consciousness. I'm semi-open to it. I tend to believe more in this idea and this perfectly converges with the question about what happens when people die. I'm much way more believing in this idea that, like, I went through when I started to have like a physical health breakdown, and then I experienced some narcissism from some women, but I was narcissistic too, like in many ways in my dating. But like I had like multiple instances of it. COVID, social media notifications, text messaging, um, physical pain, like, and then going through testing, all of it ended up, and then having like predisposition to certain mental health conditions. It ended up where I was like in a form of hell for a little while there. But a lot of what got implicated was um had not yet, I had gone through like the 12 steps to try to make peace with some of the things I had done and some of the things that had been done to me. And what got implicated in that process was that that project hadn't been, it's not a one and done, or it's not even something that is complete, but it's complete enough. And since then, I've done way more work. And then both my father died in the middle of that, and then we found out my mother passed. But we had to be estranged from her because her mental health was so terrible that she would try to like destroy me and my sister's life. And so we found out she was gone and decided to make peace. It forced me to make peace with both on some level, and in a way that I exceeded, or I got over some sort of threshold where like the weight, for lack of a better metaphorical term, like of these history was alleviated, where a lot of times when and listen, it could be also I'm on some psychiatric meds for depression and anxiety that also could be really part of this. But I don't think they're sufficient enough to explain. Most times when I'm like, oh, if I'm going to pass away, like I'm at peace, not in a way where I want to bring it on, but while I was in that existential issue and I thought maybe I was going to die, and then they did find a little bit of cancer in me, but after everybody telling me there's nothing wrong with me, they accidentally found something because of a kidney stone. Like I was horrifically weighted with a lot of stuff from the past that I just don't have that weight anymore. And so this idea that I'm going to pass away or whatever into oblivion in a way where I've made peace with what I've done with my life and the relationships I have, I feel like that is a state. And I feel like people that don't make that peace might be in a kind of hell. Now, are they spared the mercies of that? I mean, are they given the mercies of not having to have that for eternity? I don't like the idea that they're going to be eternally in that place. Like that, apparently that's something that the Bible says, but I think that there's something in C.S.
I know that the
Lewis.
Bible says it, but I don't think that all Christians actually adhere to that.
Sure. C.S. Lewis, he wrote these children's books, contemporary era called Tolkien, but he was like an apologist
Oh yeah,
mere
I'm
Christianity.
very familiar with C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, he said this idea. He said two ideas. One is that the hell's locked from the inside. So in other words, there's a voluntariness about like being in that place. But he also said all of our life, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but it made sense for me in terms of like being in active addiction, seeing other people in active addictions, and then being in recovery, where he said all of our life we are becoming either heavenly or hellish creatures. Now, heaven and hell are loaded words. So he goes on to describe like one is being more full of light and fellowship and forgiveness and like being more at peace with each other and wanting to like promote the welfare of other people around you. And the other one's like you're in resentment and enmity and hatred and bitterness, and like you just want to feel good all the time. Like that's what he implied. And I do believe those are spiritual states of beings. I don't think they're like you're in them, or you can kind of like go in and out of them. And sometimes you can be totally in them. Like I was in them for seasons of my life where my life was more characterized by the one set of energies than the other. And so maybe there's a tipping point that you tip into a spiritual condition overall that's composed of all these properties. But again, it breaks down because there's lots of different sub properties. So I don't know, this idea that you're like in hell or not in hell, like makes a lot of sense, but you can be in something alive that, you know, like I've been there where I was like, I didn't want to be here because it was all suffering and pain, but I didn't want to end it either because that was not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But that's how bad it was for a little while for me.
So, what do you think with Catholicism, or at least when you deal with people or you talk to people and you tell them about Catholicism, what do you think is the most misunderstood part of it? Or at least to you, what do you feel gets misunderstood a lot, if anything?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the sexuality. I think the beliefs about the sexuality get misunderstood the most.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of things, a lot of stuff that we talked about, and it's not all people's fault because, like, in order to fully understand what the church thinks, like, you have to be almost like a committed intellectual,
Yeah.
like to do your due diligence. Otherwise, you're going to use these sketches. You're going to use shorthand and sketches. And the church has been forced to because it's an institution. Any institute, you're forced to have sketches if you're dealing with large numbers of people. If you don't have any sketches to give these people, you can't demand they all be clergy and intellectuals. So that would be the broader one. But more specifically within that same framework is, you know, this idea, and a lot of Protestants, and this was a stumbling block to me, where here's a great little anecdote. Like when I first got clean, like 20 years ago, like I was in my late 20s, but I had friends that were like in their early 20s. And there were a couple of them that they were like committed Christians and committed to not having sex. And they started like rushing to get married so they could have sex. And so I was like, doesn't that defeat the purpose, A, but B, like if you bring that purpose into it, like, aren't you still being like the idea that you guys are married doesn't endow that magically the act. Like it's obviously has properties to it that are connected to your motivations, like why you did it and what you're doing. Like it's not just like belief is, for me, is an either or. It's more like, because you can be married and you might as well not be married, right? And you could conceivably, although I'm pretty sure the church would acknowledge this, but they don't want to encourage it. But you could probably be in a situation with somebody that's not labeled using the same language, but have enough of the same energies that it meets the criteria. And the criteria is not to objectify or instrumentalize another person sexually. To look at the main reason. That doesn't mean there can't be subsidiary reasons, because they acknowledge there's supporting reasons, but the primary reason for marriage and sexuality is for procreation, for generative procreation done in the form of trying to like create families. There's this idea of subsidiarity. So within your own heart and your own system, you try to create like as much as you can, like a righteousness, not the right word, but like a morality, let's say. And then within your marriage, you try to do that. Then within your family, you try to do it. Then within your neighborhood, and then hopefully that scales up to the world, right? And so it's not just procreation and like we'll have a bunch of kids and we'll go about our business. It's like procreation with the intent to like raise those children to be stewards of the material world in a positive way, within certain constraints that are going to help them do that. And so sexuality needs to be subordinated to that. Now, if you're childless, and this is the thing, this would open up a tangent, but there are some people, Catholics, who are open to, technically same sexuality is not ever permissible, but there are some people that are arguing that they want to figure out what is, and I believe this, not all same sexuality desire is of the same variety. There's a difference in kind, not in degree, when it comes to that kind of thing. But that's either way. People that aren't going to have kids, does that mean they're not allowed to have sex? No, because the secondary thing could be part of like the bonding. Like it can be part of your love for each other.
Gotcha.
And it is part of the love for each other. And so this idea that you just don't want to do it because it's dirty or shameful. No, and I've seen this, like I've done this, like I was taught by my mother, who was like what's considered a second wave feminist. There was like 3 waves of feminism, apparently, not to objectify women. But I wasn't taught to more broadly not objectify people. And so I had a very narrow version of what that was. And it was like not using somebody for sex and not looking at women as sexual objects. It's deeper than that, because I've looked at women as romantic objects, and I've like used flowery, like soulmate language that is replete in our culture in order to justify that, when it was really kind of dark and possessive. And when things didn't go my way, I would get angry at them because they changed their mind. Like it was really, really, it was terrible. And I'm really ashamed of it. But I was objectifying that person. Like whereas now the person I'm dating, like I'm really like, I want what's best for you. Like obviously I'm biased because I would rather be with you, but to the extent that I can kind of separate that out, be like, listen, if you need not to be with me. Like I care about you. I want what's good for you. Like I see you as more than just what you mean to me.
Right.
Right. Like, and so that gets supported with like, there's extensive like work on, they call it the theology of the body in Catholic tradition. So I think it gets misunderstood, like why, and the priesthood, why they're not allowed to have sex and be married. I think one of the reasons, and I'll end the answer to this question unless you have follow-up
No, you're
questions
good.
with this little thing, is I've speculated that at least part of the motivation to, or at least one of the unintended consequences of having celibacy was basically for most of human history, but particularly in the Middle Ages, there were small political units that acted like mafioso.
Mm-hmm.
Like mafioso was, and people argue still have that, but you at least have some sort of like due process. And like now nations at least try to put on a veneer of human, like respecting human rights. Whereas back in the Middle Ages, even if you were a Christian, you're like, I'll come and take your shit. Like I'm stronger than you. And then I'm going to be like the mafia. So you gotta pay me. I mean, that's like patronage. It's literally the mafia, the literal mafia is actually an offshoot of feudalism. If you trace it back far enough, like
Gotcha.
it's feudal practice. Right. And so if you think about what the mafia might do to you, now normally the mafia, like in the modern world doesn't usually touch women and children, but the mafias of the past would kill your family.
Yeah.
And so you needed people, if they were going to speak truth to power and be critics of the society, not to have those kind of like, because then they're going to like water down like them being like the voice of peace and the voice of restraint.
Mm-hmm.
Like they'll literally like, shut up, I'll kill your family. And that will work because your family comes before stopping him from robbing like the next feudal unit over. Right. And so I think that there's something to that of having your moral concerns be separated from these other moral concerns that provide the energy and the impetus to provide different moral services. And I would argue very strongly that in particular the Catholic Church has served these morally innovative purposes to our Western civilization. The one book I read was about, now it cuts both ways because basically there were Catholic priests in the 1500s in the New World who objected to the idea of enslaving non-Christian natives.
Mm-hmm.
And even Christian natives, and they got excommunicated by the Vatican because the Vatican got co-opted by mercantile interests.
Mm-hmm.
But they like fought and were willing to be excommunicated. And this is controversial when I'm saying this is very triggers a lot of people because they believe they kind of retroactively cast their morality back, or they assert their morality as a matter of fact, like it's just obvious. I don't agree with that. If you look at human history, the morality we have in the West is not the main morality. I'm not saying it had to come from Christianity because it pops up in Buddhism. It can pop up independently, but it's not the main strain or stream of morality. Mm-hmm. And honestly, if you could go back in time and take a poll in the 1500s of attitudes about slavery, most people would be like, I don't want to be a slave, but I don't think it's wrong to be a slave. I really hope I don't. And so the ability to provide that moral innovation, even if it's in increments and even if it's just a small voice, is supported by celibacy in a certain way. Now, could you still achieve that without celibacy? Sure. But I think the sexuality isn't just to be like anti-sex and to be like that's bad or shameful. Although that happens. A lot of Christians do channel those energies because sexuality is so powerful in a way that protects themselves from it, but it's not really, if that might be just a necessary evil for them. They shouldn't universalize that as the reason why sexuality needs to be constrained.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Well, what would you say would be to you the most unique thing? And we can either go with Christianity in general or Catholicism specifically against like maybe the backdrop of other denominations. But what do you think would be the most unique to you?
So for Catholicism, and it's connected to Christianity, but I think because of the long history of the church and some of the things I was just referencing, mm-hmm. there's this ability and there's this way of framing the role both of, the clergy in the church, but also just a layperson. Like it's a way to approach challenging like things as they exist. So back to the politics, but the politics is important. Like I was brought up in a revolutionary mindset, and there's this idea that we're going to explode all these structures and replace them with better things. The world doesn't work that way. Even if you argued that the ends were the right ends, like that's a separate, in a way, it's a separate argument, like how you get there. And I remember my parents talking about, do the ends justify the means? And that's even a separate question. But the point is, it was this idea that we would explode things. And I rejected that, particularly like starting about 10, 15 years ago, because I saw how toxic. And again, I don't know if my parents' toxicity used that as an excuse or if it was actually helped fuel their toxicity in terms of their dysfunction and their attitudes, because they didn't teach me, for example, this idea of like the right to self-defense. I was exposed to like adult sexuality in a way that came from their free hippie love that was, even though it was minor compared to the terrible things I've heard that have happened to people, it still affected me because a child doesn't understand sexuality.
Yeah,
and I was exposed to naked bodies. And so there's multiple examples where they were just like, oh, we can just dispense with these things. And it literally was part of my trauma. And I'm not trying to be like, oh, trauma and like sob story, but I'm like, everybody has trauma, right? Like, or wounds. We call them wounds. They're human wounds. That might be a better way, because trauma makes it sound like only some people get traumatized. I think everybody has their wounds. But the point is, I rebelled against all that because I saw the toxicities, at least specifically for me. So I was like, I want to be conservative. Like, I want to work hard, like personal responsibility, like, and all this other stuff. So I became like, I started to like veer towards being a right winger. And it was really funny because that's not really who I am. Like I'm a social worker by vocation. And I've been around like so many different cultures, like growing up around here. And I'm interested in ideas. Like I'm liberal in the small L of the word liberal in multiple ways. And so what I found with Catholicism was this idea of reform as opposed to revolution. And so, and if you look closely, what was advocated often is this idea that the voices of the church and the voices of the people in the church are going to be ones that they try to cooperate with the powers that be. And the powers that be could be your family. They could be the neighborhood. They could be norms. They could be mores. You know what I mean? The powers that be are structures, right? That you're going to attempt to reform those structures and not just destroy them, like without any humility, but you're going to attempt to reform them. And I found a home and a place for, because I don't want to go too far in it, but I criticized my parents multiple times in this, and I don't like doing that because in so many ways they were such beautiful. They did not seek money or power, and they taught me not to seek money. And I'm not saying seeking money and power is bad, but seeking money and power can change the complexion of who you are. It's a different person whose their main drive is money and or power, right? They're just a different kind of person. I think it's difficult for them to be, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's difficult for them to be like, to have more moral concern and like try to be helpful to people and be loving and kind and compassionate and all that stuff. It's just more difficult. And so there's just like so many times where they stood up for people that didn't have a voice. My mom was a nurse for like babies on incubators. She would go to North Philly in these bad neighborhoods and visit like these babies on incubators, and the drug dealers would like eventually like figure out who she was and like we're like, well, we'll look out for you. Like the corner boys would be like, all right, you're good. We know who you are. You're a nurse. You're going and helping one of the babies on this block. And my mom didn't care. She was fearless. And my dad like took under like some of my friends that either their fathers weren't real present or they didn't have fathers. He like took them and would take us out to do activities and try to keep us out of trouble as early teenagers. We still got into trouble eventually, but when my father died, like multiple of them came and they're like, oh man, like I like, it was clear that my dad had an impact on their lives, and like we all got in trouble and now we're all like doing relatively good as adults, and he may have had a role, we don't know, but he probably had a role in helping us. And so yeah, my point with all that was I was given these, and I'm not trying to act like I'm morally superior than anybody. I'm saying it's like, it's a set of preferences, set of interests. Like I am interested in like ameliorating human suffering, my own and other people. Like I'm interested in contributing to like making the world work better, whether locally or even broadly. I try to confine it more to local because as it goes, scales out, it gets more and more distortion. And you see it like on social media, people when they debate. That's why I didn't want to debate about these things on this like frame, like that big frame, for some of the same reasons. But I am very concerned with using whatever gifts I've been given and or I've developed through hard work and exert them in the direction of like creating things and maintaining like things.
Yeah.
Like I've been innovative with the way that I try to help the few men that I sponsor. Like I go outside the box. I challenge some of the dogmas in the 12-step programs, that there's unhealthy things that they suggest or things that don't really make sense, that are just like sketches and shorthands. And I'm like, no, let's unpack that. No, I actually look at it this way. And it's a very small thing and it's just a tiny ripple in the ocean, but like I'm proud of it. And Catholicism was like, all right, how can you can come in here and let's take that and let's keep doing that. Like you're not going to like change who you are and what you do. It's more going to like help you supplement or orient it, rather than there's going to be a qualitative differently set of values and practices that are going to supplant your previous beliefs.
Gotcha.
And if you look at the history of Catholicism and the way it like kind of synthesized, now this is a criticism of Catholicism, but it's also part of its charms and part of its merits is the way that it absorbed like pagan traditions over the centuries. That same ethic is involved in that. So
Sure. No, you're good. I'm going to restart the Zoom one more time. We're at the closing, but it's only got 5 minutes, and I'm afraid it'll cut off in the middle of our trying to close and everything. So I'm going to restart and send it back, send you the link, and we'll do that. All right?
Beautiful.
Almost done, honey. All right. All right. So the final question that I would have is, do you think there'd be any sort of evidence or argument or something, or do you think that it's possible that your mind could be changed about the existence of this God or the truth of Catholicism or Christianity as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I don't know that I'd necessarily like this, but I don't know. I'm ambivalent about the fact of that because on one sense, again, back to the things that I was taught that was good, that went too far, like skepticism. Like I've had these conversations within little Christian circles about the utility of doubt. Like to me, having observed people, because you kind of got to believe in recovery, like, and they teach you have to believe in a higher power, but you have to believe in change when you're trying to recover.
Yeah.
And so I had witnessed people, and I had been encouraged to question because you want to interrogate it to make it real enough so that it works for you. Like, and so the opposite of faith is not doubt, it's indifference. Just like the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
But there can be like a toxic ongoing doubt that's like that revolutionary. You're just doubting everything all the time. But like a kind of doubt where you're like searching and you're open, like that's humility, actually. That's connected to humility. Like the idea that with new information, I'm going to change my mind. Like, absolutely. Like I will never stop like being open to new information. Like I refuse to. Like it's such a built into me. And there's been so many positive outcomes in my life, or at least things I can stand by, like me challenging like bullies, but challenging teachers, challenging people to think, like challenging. Like I've been a challenger in many ways. And again, I'm not trying to elevate. It's been in small little ways. And I've also been a troublemaker in some ways. I've been a chaos sower. So it can tilt in the wrong way sometimes. But the point is, yes, I could always be open, and the faith in the is a fragile thing. But the thing about it is, and this is the Catholic, and I heard someone else on a channel talking about this recently, is that the way that Catholicism is delivered in terms of like I had to go through catechesis. No, I don't know if priests do catechesis, but anyway, there was a process of adult initiation where I met with this deacon like once a week for like 4 months, and we talked about the catechism, and then he said I had to read the whole thing, so I read the whole thing. But the point is, like what I was taught, like what it was about, was much more focused on the sacraments. So it's like, yes, the ideas, and you're gonna like encounter some of the similar ideas, and if you're in that environment, you're going to, like, what do they call it? It's like certain playgrounds. Actually, someone said this years ago. Like, you're not gonna. He said this about sending somebody, going back to hanging out with people that use when you're clean. It's like showing up to a football field with like a lacrosse stick and a lacrosse mask on. Like, so, like if you go to the Catholic Church, you're going to like be led to ideas that we're talking about, like the way that we express our faith in language, like our belief. You're both going to encounter it organically, I think, through the practices, but you're also, it's part of the landscape. It's part of the props.
Gotcha.
That's the analogy, right? However, we believe things, but we get accused of centering our salvation on works because of this. And that in other words, we get accused of saying that if you just do good things, including the rituals, but also the acts of service, that's going to earn you a place. And that's not what we believe. I don't think that's what I'm doing either. But and this is what I was taught in the program too. Like the program is like, keep coming. We say to each other, keep coming back. Like I've had times, it's funny because I set myself up with the program so that I don't make stupid decisions by creating a sort of structure that the Catholic Church also encourages in their own way, which is like, I will give the program 2 weeks notice because first people I'm responsible to them in some way. Like they need to know, like I'm not a sneaky person. So I'm not going to pretend I'm clean when I'm not. And I'm not just going to ghost people and disappear, but also I'm aware that this could be a passing thing. And so I don't need to rush the decision. Like the liquor store and the pot dispensary, because that's where my mind goes to. Well, I would need a medical card first, but the guy that gives the medical card, because in Pennsylvania it's still only medical, and the liquor store where I would buy wine will still be there in a couple weeks. Why don't I go engage in the rituals and then see if my mind changes? And almost invariably, that's what happens. And so I'm totally open to my mind changing, but I'm committed to continuing in the habits.
Right.
And I feel like that provides me enough. And some people get criticized. Within the church, there's these criticisms of each other where they're like, there are a lot of these priests don't even believe in any of the miraculous stuff. They just, they're all like, secular now, but they do it because it's like, because of a lot of things I described.
Tradition.
Like it's tradition, but it also like, it informs and helps its community.
Oh yeah.
It informs and helps like these other projects. So, like these universities that we were talking about, or these charitable projects, like there's a lot of Catholic charities that provide direct service. And so a lot of these priests can be involved in that, and it gives them a sense of purpose, but they're like, is this really real? I don't know, but I want to be a good person. Right. And so we can be criticized for that on one hand, because it's like, you're a hypocrite. You're telling us to believe this, you don't believe it. But on the other hand, it actually accommodates in a healthy way new evidence, but also it accommodates like the fact that this is a hard thing to accept. And this is where I totally understand skepticism. Like this is a very, very difficult thing to accept on multiple levels. I ultimately have found more of value within it than I have not. And I'm willing to make faith leaps about certain things.
Mhm.
So I don't know that I would ever engage in apologetics in the way that a lot of people engage in apologetics. I'm more narrative driven. In sociology or anthropology, they call it ethnography.
Mhm.
And in the 12-step programs, we tell our stories. Like we get up and share, right? And we tell
Right.
our like that's more my apologetics would be telling my stories. It wouldn't be, because I acknowledge like a lot of it involves faith leaps. Now, you do get to a place where it's like, if I were to like recede back into something more like, well, I'm not sure the universe, I think there's something out there, but I'm going to still retain some of the accoutrements of Catholicism, but my theology is going to shift a little bit. Would that be the end of the world? Would I be like, would I go back to that hellish place? Would I not be able to like existentially accommodate like what I need to in order to like live in a stage of my life for the rest of my life? Like, I don't think so. So now, could it open doors back into an old way of life? Yeah, sure. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I'm measuring it more, and this is a Christian, they call it by the fruits. What is the outcome? Now, again, I don't want to unduly be like, well, the beliefs don't matter, because they do. And I'm willing to talk about them, engage them. But I'm trying to balance this desire to subordinate some of my thinking to a thinking that may be superior to mine. Now, whether that comes from God or just tradition or both, I don't know, while also being open to other ideas. Now, it's kind of a
Gotcha.
weird like balance to walk, but that's what I'm trying to do.
No, I get it, and I think that's a good answer. So, well, we've run the gambit. We went down through all the questions. You were great about everything.
Thank you.
I thank you for taking the time because,
Of
as you
course.
know, this was the first one. I hope that you felt that it was just a platform where you could like express what you believed without the pushback and things. Because the whole point of this to me is kind of dialogue, like trying to
Yeah.
understand the other side,
Yeah.
like we were saying about being open-minded. I think that is very, very important. And the only way that you can truly be open-minded is if you try to understand the other side. So,
Yeah, and I can be naive in this sometimes, but my dad also did teach me this. It's like, and in a way, this is can be labeled Christian, although it's not exclusive. That's Christianity doesn't have a monopoly on it. But like, I don't really know you, like I don't really know John, but
right.
like I have been taught to try to seek and find, the good in other people,
Yeah.
and the kindness and the openness and the charity and the talents and all those things. And it's like it makes like engaging with other people like this beautiful adventure, because I'm a more of like an introvert because of certain types of neuroticism, so
Hmm.
I'm not like a social butterfly, but I also do love people. And it's like you seem like such a cool guy, and we're so like gracious, and like you have like the great like voice for this. I'm like,
Oh,
oh dude,
appreciate
he's
that.
like, yeah. And it's just been, yeah, it's been nice to like be able to take a risk, even though I was a little wary because I just
Oh
didn't want
yeah,
to
I
be
get it. I
ambushed.
completely get it.
Yeah, and it would have been okay. It just would have been like, I wouldn't have been mad. I was just like, this is not what I'm looking to do.
Right.
Like the worst thing that happened, I get ambushed and it's on the internet. I don't care. Like I'll make another video like saying, in this video this happened, but that's not what happened. So it would have been all good at the end, but it's just like, yeah, I mean, there's a big world out there, and there's all these different people, and they have all these different gifts and interests and talents, and it's I really have been taught by my upbringing, but also the 12-step program, to see people as people before any of this other stuff.
Yeah.
Now, does that mean that I'm going to overlook like some substantive differences between beliefs? Like, no, because in many ways I can't.
Hmm.
But there seems to be more room for collaboration. It's just something I'm learning like in therapy. Like there's just boundaries.
Absolutely.
You just
Absolutely.
talk to people. It's like, we're not going to, if we can't see eye to eye on this little aspect of things, we're going to try to find a way that we either separate, and it's not fully separating. It just might be separating in this one way. And so, yeah. So thank you is the ultimate point. Thank you.
Well, no,
And
thank you.
it's,
You're the one
yeah,
that stepped out and is coming up on the platform because I know that's not an easy thing to do. Like you
yeah,
said, you don't know. I know that the debate space is a huge thing right now,
yeah,
and a lot of the internet debate spaces run off gotchas. and trying to
Yes.
put someone into a trap and things. And I think that there's a place for that and there's a time for
Okay.
that and things.
Sure.
But I also think that, like I said, talking and communicating between each other and trying to understand positions is the only
Yeah.
way that we can really move forward or have any sort of progress.
Yeah, and that's a higher good than being right.
Absolutely,
That's
absolutely.
a higher good. So
And
I support that higher
before I
good.
close out the interview, I do want you to one more time promote your channel and stuff. You said it was Joel Schaefer Harris on YouTube. Do you have a TikTok as well?
Nope, just
Just on the
YouTube right
YouTube.
now. Yep.
Well, I
And
definitely want
yeah,
to once again reiterate that
thank
anyone
you.
watching this at any time should cruise on over to your channel and give it a like and a subscribe. And I look forward to talking to you some more. We have each other's contact stuff. And yeah, we'll get together and collaborate in future. I know you and John are going to do that conversation coming up sometime. I don't think there's not a solid date yet, but everybody's going to have to watch out for that.